They say heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes they don't even walk on two legs. In a sleepy neighborhood on the outskirts of Minneapolis, a horrifying incident unfolded when a calm summer evening exploded into screams, flashing lights, and unimaginable fear. A young black woman, returning home from a late shift, found herself in the crosshairs of two officers who harbored an ugly, racist grudge. But just when hope seemed lost, an unlikely duo sprang into action, her beloved dogs. No one could have predicted the chain of events that followed, or how a single moment of darkness would spark a fire in an entire community. Ebony Carter was a hard-working veterinary technician who had just finished a grueling late shift at the Hennepin County Animal Hospital, a real-life facility in Minneapolis. The stifling heat made her exhausted, and all she wanted to do was get home, slip off her shoes, and relax with her two rescue dogs, Athena, a gentle Rottweiler, and Orion, a spirited German Shepherd. They were Ebony's family, her protectors, and her most loyal companions. That night, the moon hung low in the sky, bathing the suburban streets in ghostly light. Ebony pulled into her driveway, feeling an eerie sense of disquiet. It was unnervingly silent. No neighbors watering their lawns, no stray cars rolling by. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. She dismissed the tension as work-related fatigue until she noticed an unfamiliar police cruiser parked across the street. Two uniformed officers stood outside, their eyes tracking her every move like predators studying unsuspecting prey. Ebony tried to ignore the unwelcome stares, but the weight of their gaze pressed against her. She fumbled with her house keys, heart pounding, uncertain what to expect. Then suddenly, one of the officers stepped forward, his hand casually resting on his holster. Ebony's pulse quickened. She didn't realize that this small act of aggression was about to become the tinder that would spark a night none of them would soon forget. As soon as Ebony unlocked her front door, Athena and Orion bounded toward her, their tails wagging in a flurry of excitement. She hugged them both, grateful for their presence. She set down her things and closed the door, still feeling the officer's eyes on her. A few minutes later, a pounding knock reverberated through the house. "Police," a voice barked. "Open up." Ebony's stomach churned. She had done nothing wrong, so why were they at her door? The memory of racial injustices she'd witnessed on the news flitted through her mind, heightening her anxiety. Still, Ebony composed herself, opened the door a crack, and peeked out. The taller of the two officers wore a sneer that curled his lips into something distinctly hostile. His partner, slightly shorter, had a hardened expression that betrayed no emotion, yet Ebony sensed something malevolent behind his eyes. She noticed how their gazes flickered past her and into the hallway, as though searching for an excuse. "We got a call about suspicious activity in this house," the first officer said. Ebony felt her heart flip. Suspicious activity? She had only just arrived home. Suspicious activity? "I don't know what you're talking about," Ebony replied quietly, gripping the doorknob so the tremble in her hand wouldn't show. "I live here. I just got home from work." Without waiting for an invitation, the officers stepped forward, nearly pushing her aside. A primal wave of anxiety flooded her. Athena and Orion sensed their owner's fear. Orion let out a low growl, and Athena stood protectively in front of Ebony. The tension was so thick it felt like a dam about to burst, about to unleash a torrent of chaos. The officer's eyes landed on the dogs with a flash of apprehension. Large breed dogs often carried unwarranted stereotypes, and Ebony could see the flicker of fear morph into aggression in their expressions. She tried to placate everyone, speaking to the officers in a calm voice, her training at the animal hospital kicking in. "Please," Ebony said, placing a hand on Orion's collar to keep him back. "My dogs are protective, but they won't hurt you. Just take it easy." The shorter officer, whose name tag reads Stanton, muttered under his breath, "Yeah, sure." He reached down to unfasten the safety clasp on his baton. The taller one, Officer Diaz, glared at Ebony. "We had a tip about illegal substances being stored here," Diaz claimed. "We need to search the premises." Ebony felt her heart slump. She'd heard about pretexts like this used as justification for harassing black residents. She knew her rights, though she also knew how quickly situations could spiral out of control if she protested too much. "You'll need a warrant," she replied, as calmly as she could manage. "I know my rights. Unless you have one, I can't let you search my home." A flicker of anger crossed Diaz's face. He took a step closer to Ebony, towering over her. "Look here, girl, don't you start telling us about your rights." Ebony felt a sickening drop in her stomach. The word girl hung in the air, laden with disrespect. She swallowed her protest, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She still tried to remain composed for her own safety and for her dogs. Then Stanton turned his glare on Orion, who was still growling protectively. "Shut that mutt up," he barked. It was too late. The tension soared like a coiled spring about to snap, and snap it did. In a jarring moment, Stanton lunged forward, baton raised, as though he intended to strike Orion preemptively. Ebony screamed, holding onto Orion's collar, trying to keep him back and keep the officer from hurting her beloved pet. Athena barked, confusion and loyalty warring in her canine eyes. "Stop!" Ebony cried. "He's not doing anything." Stanton ignored her. Fear and adrenaline contorted his features. From Ebony's vantage, it looked less like policing and more like a personal vendetta. Diaz roughly grabbed Ebony by the arm, yanking her away from the dogs. The sudden force made her stumble and bang her shoulder against the doorframe. Pain exploded through her arm. Ebony twisted around, trying to shield Athena and Orion, but Diaz clamped down on her with surprising strength. She caught a glimpse of Stanton swinging his baton dangerously close to Orion's head. In that instant, Ebony found her voice. She screamed again, both in terror for her dogs and in searing pain from Diaz's grip. Outside, a porch light flickered on from a neighbor's house. Through her peripheral vision, Ebony noticed a silhouette at the window. Someone was watching. At least one set of eyes would witness this injustice. A spark of hope flared inside her. Maybe that neighbor would help. But then Ebony felt a ruthless knee jam into her back. She crashed to the floor, and Diaz pressed her face into the carpet. The humiliation stung as much as the physical pain. Her arms were forced behind her, and she felt the cold metal of handcuffs snap around her wrists. "Why are you doing this?" Ebony rasped, tears now freely streaming down her face. "I haven't done anything wrong." Stanton, breathing heavily and brandishing his baton, turned to Ebony with a chilling smirk. "We're the police. We decide who's wrong." As Ebony lay pinned to the floor, Orion snapped at Stanton's baton, trying to protect his owner. Stanton swatted the air near the shepherd's head, missing by inches. Athena barked, each sound more desperate. Then, in a single fluid motion, she launched herself at the officer's arm, forcing him to drop the baton. Stanton yelled, stumbling backward. Diaz was momentarily distracted by the commotion. Ebony felt his grip loosen. She wiggled free just enough to see Stanton raise his arm to strike Athena. Ebony screamed, but before Stanton could land a blow, Orion lunged, clamping his powerful jaws around the officer's wrist. It was not a savage mauling. Orion seemed to sense the difference between aggression and a desperate protective measure. He held Stanton at bay, preventing further harm. The sight was terrifying and magnificent all at once. Ebony's dogs, with unyielding loyalty, fighting to protect her, to keep her safe from this nightmarish assault. Stanton howled in pain and rage, swinging wildly with his free hand. Diaz, consumed with shock, let Ebony go to rush to his partner's side. Ebony knew the dog's bravery might come with a cost. If the cops had no qualms assaulting her, they would have even fewer compunctions about shooting her dogs. Gritting her teeth against the fear, Ebony struggled to stand, the handcuffs digging into her wrists. She saw Diaz reach for his gun. In that moment, time slowed. With pure maternal instinct, Ebony hurled herself forward, slamming into Diaz. Her momentum and his lack of balance caused him to tumble. The gun skittered across the floor, out of reach. Ebony trembled with adrenaline, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. This was about survival now. The commotion drew more lights and faces to the windows. Several neighbors, awakened by the shouting and barking, peered out into the night. One neighbor, Mr. Walter Jenkins, stepped onto his porch. Ebony had only spoken to him a few times in passing, but now, hearing Ebony's panicked cries, he rushed across the street. His phone was out, already recording. In modern times, a single phone camera can become the most powerful tool to reveal truth. And truth was exactly what Ebony needed. Jenkins shouted, "I'm calling 911, not for the police, but for an ambulance and for more help." He could see Ebony's distressed state, the bruises forming on her arms, and the aggressive stance of the officers. Diaz scrambled to his feet, eyes wide, clearly worried about being filmed. Stanton clutched his wrist, a trickle of blood seeping where Orion had latched on. Ebony felt a wave of relief, seeing Jenkins with his phone, but she still feared for her dogs. "Get back!" Stanton snarled at Jenkins, but the neighbor ignored him, continuing to film. Ebony's shoulders sagged in relief she wasn't alone. The officers couldn't just continue their assault under the spotlight of a camera. Other neighbors appeared, some of them also filming. The entire scene was lit by the harsh beams of porch lights and phone screens. Ebony still felt Diaz's presence behind her, but the fear that had almost paralyzed her gave way to a fierce determination. She lifted her tear-streaked face at Jenkins's camera and spoke as loud as she could. "I'm Ebony Carter. I live here. These officers attacked me without cause. They threatened my dogs," she panted, arms still wrenched behind her. "Please record everything." At the sight of half a dozen watchful neighbors, Diaz and Stanton exchanged a look. Their bravado cracked, replaced by a flicker of panic. The dogs, no longer under direct threat, retreated to Ebony's side, growling softly. For a moment, the entire street was cloaked in tense silence, each side assessing the next move. With neighbors and phone cameras turned on them, Diaz tried to salvage control of the situation. "She resisted arrest," he barked, pointing at Ebony with a trembling hand. "We got a credible tip about drugs. She wouldn't cooperate." Ebony's eyes blazed. "That's a lie," she shot back. "I asked for a warrant. You had none. You started assaulting me." At Ebony's words, several neighbors nodded in agreement. "We've got it all on video, officer," one neighbor said firmly. "You have no right to be here without a warrant." Stanton, holding his injured wrist, spat on the ground. "She let her dogs attack us." Ebony's fury flared. "They were defending me." "You had your baton raised to strike my dog. What did you expect?" Jenkins approached cautiously, his phone still aimed at the officers. "The paramedics are on their way," he informed them. "I called them because I saw how you were treating her. And her dogs." He paused, voice shaking with outrage. "I saw it all." The flash in Stanton's eyes revealed the hatred he still harbored. But the presence of a growing crowd, all with cameras out, stayed his hand. Diaz, wiping sweat from his brow, seemed torn between continuing to assert his power and retreating in the face of mounting evidence. Ebony felt anger boiling inside her, mingling with disbelief. She thought of every news story she had read about unarmed black men and women brutalized or killed by racist policing. She had prayed it would never happen to her. And yet, here she was, in handcuffs, cowering in her own home. If not for her brave dogs and vigilant neighbors, she might not be alive to tell this story. The blare of sirens cut through the tense summer air. 2 more patrol cars arrived, lights flashing, along with an ambulance. Ebony felt her heart flutter. She was still cuffed, her dogs circling anxiously around her legs. The newly arrived officers took one look at the broken door, Ebony's bruised arms, Stanton's bleeding wrist, and realized something major had gone down. A commanding female officer, name tag reading Johnson, stepped forward. Her eyes flickered from Ebony to Diaz and Stanton, then to the bystanders recording everything. "What's going on here?" Johnson demanded, scanning the scene. Before Ebony could speak, Diaz piped up. She resisted arrest. "We got a tip about drugs. You got a tip, or you fabricated one." Ebony snapped, voice hoarse. "They never presented a warrant." Johnson's gaze hardened. "Did you or did you not have a warrant?" she asked Diaz and Stanton. The hush that followed was damning. Stanton spoke up hastily. "We had probable cause. The dogs attacked. We have it all on camera." Jenkins interjected from behind his phone. "She was assaulted without reason." The dogs reacted when Stanton tried to beat them. Officer Johnson took a breath, her posture rigid. "Let's everyone stay calm." She motioned for the paramedics to check on Ebony, Stanton, and Ebony's dogs. "Cuff them all," Stanton demanded hotly, but Johnson didn't budge. "We'll sort this out," she said flatly. Ebony's heart sank even further when Johnson turned to her. "Ma'am, I need you to remain in handcuffs for the time being while we investigate." Ebony bit back a retort. She had hoped for immediate release, but at least, Ebony reasoned, her side of the story might be heard, and so she stood there, still handcuffed, while paramedics assessed her injuries. Her dogs hovered protectively. Neighbors refused to stop recording. A sense of rising anger swelled in the crowd, anger at a broken system, anger at racism still so blatant in their community, anger at the sight of Ebony, a hard-working woman, forcibly restrained in her own home. News travels fast in the age of social media, and Ebony's ordeal was no exception. Within hours, the footage from Mr. Jenkins's phone began circulating on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The images of Ebony's tear-stained face, Diaz's harsh grip, Stanton's baton brandished at two visibly distressed dogs, these snapshots ignited a firestorm online. Hashtags sprang up instantly, hashtag Justice for Ebony and hashtag Stop Racist Policing. By midday the following day, Ebony's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Strangers reached out. Journalists clamored for interviews, and local activists began planning protests outside the Hennepin County Courthouse. The raw video made it clear that Ebony had repeatedly asked for a warrant, that the dogs had acted only when threatened, and that the officer's aggression appeared completely unwarranted. Ebony, now resting at home with bandages on her arms and trauma weighing on her mind, felt torn between relief and dread. Her story was out there for the world to see, but the attention also frightened her. She worried about retaliation. She worried about Diaz and Stanton showing up again. Most of all, she worried about the possibility that, even with proof, justice might still be elusive. However, Ebony had also received an outpouring of support from community leaders, local ministers, and friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Messages poured in about how Athena and Orion were heroes, how Ebony's courage in the face of injustice had inspired others to speak out. People demanded accountability. They wanted these officers off the streets. They wanted Ebony's name cleared of any wrongdoing. Within days, Ebony received a letter from a civil rights attorney named Fiona Castillo, offering pro bono representation. Castillo was known in Minneapolis for her tenacity in fighting cases of police misconduct. Over a Zoom call, Ebony recounted the entire night's events, from the moment she arrived home to the second she was handcuffed. Castillo listened intently, nodding, taking notes. "This is a strong case," Castillo said eventually. "We have multiple witnesses, video evidence, and no legitimate warrant or probable cause. They had no right to enter your home. You have every reason to file a lawsuit against the city and these individual officers. Ebony exhaled shakily. The thought of facing Diaz and Stanton in court made her stomach knot, but a quiet resolve hardened inside her. I want them to answer for what they did, not just for me, but so nobody else has to go through this, she said. Castillo nodded. We'll gather all the evidence. We'll request the body cam footage, assuming it exists. Often, officers conveniently have their cameras turned off in these situations. Ebony's heart sank a bit at the possibility that there would be no official footage. But Castillo patted her hand reassuringly. We have enough with Mr. Jenkins's recording. The neighbors' videos too. We can prove excessive force and a warrantless search. As Ebony ended the call, she glanced down at Athena and Orion curled by her feet, a comfort she desperately needed. Whatever came next, she would face it, empowered by a newfound sense of purpose and a burning need for justice. In the weeks that followed, the Minneapolis Police Department released an official statement. They claimed that Ebony had matched the description of a wanted suspect in a narcotics case, that her dogs had endangered the officers' lives, and that Ebony had physically resisted arrest. The allegations outraged Ebony and her supporters, particularly the part about Ebony being a narcotics suspect. It felt like a desperate attempt to smear her character. Social media users pored over every detail, debunking the police statement with segments of the viral video. In the clip, Ebony could be heard calmly requesting a warrant and cooperating to the extent possible before the officers assaulted her. She hadn't lashed out physically until Diaz twisted her arm behind her back and Stanton threatened the dogs. The narcotics suspect spin soon unraveled when the police department couldn't produce any credible evidence connecting Ebony to drugs or a crime. Despite this, Ebony felt the emotional toll every day. She had to return to work with bruises on her arms and questions from concerned colleagues. Even her boss at the Hennepin County Animal Hospital felt uneasy, worried that the negative attention might somehow reflect on the clinic. Ebony reassured them she intended to keep her personal ordeal separate from her job, though her shaky mental state was becoming harder to hide. Late at night, Ebony would replay the assault in her mind, the terror of Diaz's knee on her back, Stanton's baton raised to strike. Sometimes she jolted awake in a cold sweat, the dogs at her bedside whining softly. The comfort they provided was immeasurable, yet Ebony knew the real danger wasn't just a memory, it was still out there, wearing a badge. As Ebony's civil lawsuit moved forward, the police department started an internal investigation of Diaz and Stanton. Officially, the department was adamant about seeking the truth, but Ebony and Fiona Castillo suspected a half-hearted effort to bury the fact. Then, a twist came out of nowhere, a leaked memo from a fellow officer who had overheard Diaz and Stanton joking in the locker room about ridding the streets of trouble. The memo indicated a racist motive, specifically mentioning Ebony's race. This leaked memo caused an uproar when it surfaced in a local news broadcast. The anchor read aloud excerpts. Officer Diaz was heard saying, "Black folks around here think they own this city. It's time we show them who's boss." Ebony gasped when she watched the broadcast. The hatred in those words stung like fresh salt in a wound, but it also validated her experience. She wasn't imagining the racism here was tangible proof. Public outcry escalated. Calls for Diaz and Stanton's immediate suspension intensified. Protesters gathered outside the Minneapolis Police Department headquarters, holding signs that said "Justice for Ebony" and "End racist policing now." Ebony, still reeling from the internal damage this incident had done to her sense of safety, found some measure of relief in seeing how many people stood in solidarity with her. Meanwhile, Ebony's lawyers filed additional motions to demand a complete review of both officers' past complaints. They discovered a disturbing pattern of excessive force allegations against Stanton and multiple claims of racial profiling against Diaz. These had never before led to disciplinary action. Now, with the viral video, witness statements, and the leaked memo, it seemed like the tide was finally turning. Ebony's phone rang incessantly. Supporters, reporters, activists from local organizations like Communities United Against Police Brutality, and even celebrities who had seen her story online. She was invited to speak at a rally downtown, an event that aimed to highlight systemic racism and push for reforms within the police department. Caught off guard by the sudden flood of attention, Ebony hesitated. She wasn't an activist by trade. She was a veterinary technician who loved animals, lived a quiet life, and minded her own business. But her quiet life had been shattered by one act of brutality. Maybe she could harness this spotlight to demand meaningful change. With her attorney's encouragement, Ebony agreed to speak. Standing on a makeshift stage in front of City Hall, a trembling microphone in hand, she faced a crowd of hundreds. Signs bearing her name bobbed in the sea of faces. Athena and Orion waited backstage, wagging their tails as if sensing the positivity from the crowd. Ebony spoke of that night, the fear, the violence, the heartbreak at realizing she was just another statistic of racially motivated police brutality. She expressed gratitude for her neighbors who intervened, for her dogs who saved her from worse harm, and for the community now rallying around her. Her voice wavered but never broke. The crowd erupted into applause, chants echoing, "We stand with Ebony." In the days that followed, Ebony's social media presence skyrocketed. People around the country messaged her stories of their own experiences with police racism. It was overwhelming, but Ebony responded with empathy, forging a bond with those who knew her pain. She might have been an unwilling figurehead, but the movement she represented was far bigger than just one woman's story. Just as Ebony was beginning to find her footing, a new wave of anxiety crashed over her. Threatening letters arrived at her home. Anonymous messages scrawled in blocky handwriting read things like, "Drop the case, or else," and "We know where you live." Ebony's hands shook when she read them, her dogs pricking their ears at her trembling voice. She couldn't help but wonder if Diaz or Stanton had allies within the police force who wanted to intimidate her into silence. Terrified, Ebony called Castillo. "This is harassment. It might be from some random bigots, but we can't take chances," the attorney advised. Together, they arranged private security for Ebony's home, courtesy of a local non-profit that specialized in protecting victims of hate crimes. Ebony felt safer with the additional surveillance, but the fear weighed heavily. She started double-checking her locks every time she stepped indoors. She grew skittish at the sound of sirens. In a moment of emotional vulnerability, Ebony questioned whether she should drop the lawsuit to protect herself and her dogs. Then the memory of Stanton's baton, poised to strike Athena's head, flooded back. Her resolve returned. No, she had to see this through. If she bowed to fear, what would stop them, or others like them, from continuing this abuse? "We stand for something greater than ourselves," Ebony whispered to Athena and Orion in the quiet of her living room, tears tracking down her cheeks. They licked her hands in response, their steadfast devotion shining in their eyes. At last, the day came for the preliminary hearing. It was a media circus outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, protesters demanded justice. Ebony, accompanied by Castillo, walked past them all with her head held high, though her insides churned. Inside, the press gallery was packed. Diaz and Stanton sat at the defendant's table, flanked by their own attorneys. The prosecutor laid out the charges of assault and civil rights violations against the officers. Castillo assisted with testimony, referencing not only Ebony's account, but also the video recordings. The images flickering on the courtroom screen, Stanton charging with his baton, Diaz kneeing Ebony's back, were stark and gut-wrenching. The judge's face was grim as he watched, occasionally glancing at Ebony with what looked like sympathy. In their defense, Diaz and Stanton claimed they acted in self-defense, that Ebony's dogs were the aggressors, and Ebony's refusal to comply forced them to use force. But the videos left little room for ambiguity. The judge was unimpressed with claims about a reliable tip that never materialized, or how Ebony supposedly fit the description of a narcotic suspect. By the end of the hearing, Ebony felt a surge of cautious optimism. The judge ruled there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Outside, Ebony was once again thrust into a sea of microphones and cameras. She delivered a short statement: "I want justice. Not just for me, but for all those who have suffered under racist policing. My dogs saved my life that night. Now it's time for our legal system to do its part." Over time, Athena and Orion became symbolic of unwavering loyalty and the right of every person, especially black people, to be protected rather than brutalized. Local animal organizations championed them as hero dogs, hosting adoption fairs and charity drives in their honor to support other shelter animals in need of good homes. They even made cameo appearances at an event called Paws for Justice, where Ebony spoke about how her dogs had safeguarded her, not just physically, but emotionally, throughout this ordeal. For Ebony, the dogs were more than just companions. They were living proof that love and devotion transcend everything. People frequently asked how Ebony had trained them to react so heroically. She always answered the same way: "I didn't. They just knew I was in danger." The story of Athena and Orion reached children's classrooms, where teachers used it to discuss racism, police brutality, and the importance of bystander intervention. Ebony, somewhat shy, found herself receiving letters from students praising her dogs and asking about her favorite type of dog treats. Amid all the chaos of the legal battle, these tender moments reminded Ebony of the power of empathy, kindness, and the will to stand up for what's right. The trial began months after the initial hearing, but the public's interest had not waned. Diaz and Stanton appeared defiant on the stand, insisting they had done nothing wrong. However, cross-examination revealed inconsistencies in their testimonies. Their recollection of Ebony's alleged resistance conflicted with each other's stories, and the timeline they provided contradicted not only Ebony's statements, but also the video evidence. The leaked locker room memo, though contested, painted a damning portrait of officers who harbored racist attitudes. Combined with the fact that Ebony had a spotless record and was well regarded by her community and workplace, the jury seemed skeptical of the officers' version of events. Midway through the trial, a bombshell dropped. Another witness came forward, an ex-police dispatcher, who claimed the tip Diaz and Stanton used to justify their search never existed in the official logs. She stated that Stanton had radioed in a suspicious person report only after Ebony's assault had begun, indicating a cover-up. The courtroom buzzed with astonishment. Ebony sat, tears rolling down her cheeks, as the weight of the truth finally crushed the officer's defenses. She clutched a small pendant around her neck, an engraved paw print, a gift from a friend symbolizing Athena and Orion's protection. She whispered a silent prayer of thanks. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury found Diaz and Stanton guilty of assault and violating Ebony's civil rights. The judge, in a scathing rebuke, labeled their actions a gross miscarriage of justice fueled by racial bias. The sentence included prison time and a stipulation that neither officer could work in law enforcement again. Ebony, watching the sentencing, felt a cascade of relief mixed with sorrow. Nothing would erase that night's trauma, but at least these men wouldn't hurt anyone else in uniform. The city of Minneapolis also settled Ebony's civil suit for a substantial sum, acknowledging the failure of its police force. A portion of the settlement was earmarked for reforms within the department. Ebony insisted that a fraction of the payout fund a local program to train officers in de-escalation and anti-bias methods, an initiative she believed could save other lives down the line. The public cheered the verdict as a step toward accountability, the hard karma that many online commentators had predicted for Diaz and Stanton had indeed come to pass. Their downfall was swift, public, and irreversible. Despite the legal victory, Ebony faced a challenging emotional recovery. She attended therapy sessions to address the lingering trauma. She'd flinch at the sight of police cars for a long time, and nights were still plagued by nightmares. But each time fear seized her, she reminded herself of Athena and Orion's fierce loyalty, her neighbors' solidarity, and the righteous roar of the community that had her back. The city's climate began shifting as well. In the aftermath of Ebony's case, calls for police reform became louder, more urgent. A community board was formed to review complaints against officers, ensuring transparency. Ebony, though preferring to maintain a low profile, was invited to serve on the board in an advisory capacity. Initially, she hesitated, but eventually she agreed, hoping her experiences might guide meaningful change. Meanwhile, Ebony returned to her normal routine, as normal as life could be after such a seismic event. She resumed her long shifts at the Hennepin County Animal Hospital, caring for injured animals, greeting them with the same gentle smile. Word spread among clients, and many approached Ebony with kindness, offering thanks for her courage or asking about Athena and Orion. And so Ebony found a new balance between grappling with past trauma and forging ahead with hope. Some days were harder than others, but the knowledge that Diaz and Stanton would never wear badges again gave her a certain solace. Months turned into a year. Ebony's story became a landmark case in Minneapolis, sparking dialogue about racial justice and the role of police in communities. Every time Ebony walked through her neighborhood, someone would smile or wave, calling out her name in recognition. She didn't particularly seek fame, but if her ordeal had to happen, at least it led to positive change. The real heroes, as Ebony often said, were Athena and Orion. She spoiled them with new toys and special treats, cherishing their presence. Whenever she looked into their soulful eyes, she remembered how, in her darkest hour, they risked their own safety to save her. The city recognized them in a local ceremony, awarding each dog an honorary medal. It was a symbolic gesture, but one that gave Ebony immense pride. Over time, Ebony dedicated herself to activism and continued working at the animal hospital. She found a new passion in speaking about accountability, bridging racial divides, and the transformative bond between humans and animals. Schools invited her to speak, and she'd bring Athena or Orion along, delighting children who listened in awe to the story of how two brave dogs helped bring down police corruption. In the aftermath of adversity, Ebony discovered her voice, and the community discovered its strength. Racism and corruption would not vanish overnight, but Ebony's victory proved that standing against injustice armed with truth, solidarity, and love could change lives. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of resilience, courage, and hope. Ebony's story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of deep-rooted injustice, unity and truth can spark real change. Her brave dogs, Athena and Orion, showed us how unwavering loyalty can triumph over cruelty in the blink of an eye. While racism and abuse of power still plague our society, we can take heart in the collective power we hold to stand up, speak out, and demand accountability. If this story moved you, please consider liking and sharing this video, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more tales that shine a light on real-life struggles and triumphs. Your support helps ensure that stories like Ebony's continue to reach hearts and minds everywhere. Together, let's keep fighting for a world where justice, empathy, and hope prevail.